The biggest steps I've ever taken in my own personal life have been on the heels of when I have felt that I have been at rock bottom. And that's where growth sometimes is the best.
Who doesn't want to be a great leader? A leader who's calm under pressure, insightful, respected, well-liked. But what does it take to become a great leader? Hey, I'm Boo, and welcome to my podcast. The Few Leadership Podcast defines great leadership and what great leadership looks like. And I've found some of the world's best leaders or experts in the field of leadership to help you accelerate your leadership journey so you can be an ace at the game of leadership. If you're ready to rethink everything you know about leadership, if you're excited about accelerating your leadership journey, let's strap in and ignite your leadership potential. Welcome back to the Few Podcast. I hope you've all been enjoying that journey to become a flawless leader. Wow, every now and again, you go through life, and I guess some people call them coincidences. I just call them timing. And today couldn't be any more of an example of that. My entire life, prior to joining the Air Force, prior to being a fighter pilot, and I think it was distilled in me from my grandmother, who is a hero to me. 99 years of age, she's still alive, and she just has this simple philosophy in life. And I guess it's being born, pre-World War II, being in your 20s during World War II, seeing a lot of the best and worst of humanity. And her philosophy was just get on with it. Like you just got to get on with it. To me, that translated into these three initials, GID. And whether it's walking past some kids' clothing, whether I perceive it's my job or their job, I've always had these three letters in my mind, GID. And today's guest, Mark Gottfried, is an expert in the field. Mark, can you tell me what GID stands for?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I've been excited about the opportunity. But, the GID kind of mindset, that approach is a get it done mindset. And, I just think as a basketball coach for over 35 years and played basketball as a college player and got drafted in the NBA and all that, they're for all of us, in my opinion, there are these moments of truth. And I think they're every day. And when we're faced with these moments of truth, your mind can play all kinds of games, but at the end of the day, it just comes down to the simple fact that we all have to have a get it done mindset and complete the task, get that done, and not allow all of the excuses and all of the things to creep in that they so many times can. So for me, it's kind of been a way of life, to be quite frank, with my teams in coaching when I was an athlete. Simply get it done. Sometimes it's just that simple.
It is just that simple. And I think, one of the challenges is, you would have seen generation to generation to generation, right? So you've been at those formative years, college, where people come out of a big fish in their high school, probably the superstar, back into kind of the middle to the bottom of the pecking order, and life kind of smacks you in the face, I guess, when you come there. And when people think of coaches, whether it's a life coach or a business coach, I guess all of us, we really just think of a coach, a sporting coach, an athletic coach, right? In your practice now, because you've translated that experience across into business, and you help a lot of organizations with their goal setting and delivering on those goals. In your mind, like, what do you see as some of the biggest leadership challenges that we're confronted with now as we move into this digital era, as people become more about themselves? What are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges for leaders?
First of all, I think coaching, when you're coaching in sports and athletics, it's so much like, being a CEO or leading a company. You have so many elements you're dealing with. Number one, you're trying to get people, just individuals, to buy in to your vision and the vision you have for your organization. You're wanting all your individuals to fully reach their potential and become the best they can possibly be. You want the player to become the best version of a basketball player they possibly could. And that was, I coach basketball. Then you're also looking at the kind of the whole organization. Not only do I need the individuals to become great, we collectively have to become great. And, even I think, as I've kind of watched with the digital age and the era coming in, and things are changing so rapidly with AI and even smartphones. I can remember back when I first started coaching, I didn't have a cell phone. I mean, we had to go find a landline, but everything is rapidly changing. But one thing I think stays the same is human nature. I think human nature kind of is the same through all of that. People, they kind of can end up in a complacent state. They can accept mediocrity. They get comfortable. They start making a living and, hey, this is good. And what you're always wanting as a coach is to get those individuals in your team to see a bigger picture and to strive for something else. And we should celebrate all our wins, but we can't become content with a win. It's nice. It's good. But we want to have more than that. And so even when I speak to companies and I visit with different people and CEOs, I think there's still that common thread of people that they talk about it. I want to be great. I want to lead the team in sales. I want to be at the top of the food chain. I want to stand on the top box. But are they really willing to do all of the steps necessary to get there? So I think that's still somewhat the same thread as it's been since I first started coaching 35 years ago.
Yeah, it's part of our practice. And when we talk to our keynotes and we work across multiple industry sectors, we kind of say, look, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Yeah, you might be in the medical device game. You might be selling a pharmaceutical. You might be running a whole bunch of McDonald's or franchises. But at the end of the day, we're all in the people business, right? And
yes.
It doesn't matter how great the plays are. It doesn't matter how great the system is you operate in. If you don't optimize the people, then you're never gonna win. I've got a specific question for you though, because I have this kind of concept of high performance and dynastic performance, right? And let's say you were to look at that at a season level. So you've got like the Dukes, the Roger Federers, the Serena Williams, the Patriots, within these environments where you see consistent high performance. So I'll just park that for a minute. But you spoke about the concept of a win, right? And no doubt you've coached teams and you've won a bunch of games, but you haven't won the conference. You haven't won the playoff. What's the difference? Like as a coach, what happens when you take a winning team, but to transform it into a championship team?
It's a great, great question, Boo. First of all, it's interesting. I've had a friend of mine who was, he's in sales and was doing well. He's winning, just like you mentioned, it's a team that's winning. They're winning some games and it's good, but they haven't really, taken that next step to become great and to get into that elite position. And as we talked, he was frustrated. And, my answer to him was there's a lot of times where we're close. We don't have to reinvent ourselves all the way. Sometimes, we don't have to start from scratch. We have to make adjustments that'll get us to that next step. Now that may be, there's so many things that could come into it. I think of teams that truly become unselfish and that where everybody understands their role, what they bring to the table, and they have to bring that role at a high level. And then but when you get a group of people that truly begin to kind of lay their sword down and say, man, I am all in with the team. And again, I think that's a human nature trait sometimes. I think it separates good teams from great teams. The great teams find a way to where they're completely unselfish. Guys they've understood the concept of, I always quote John Wooden. I spent 7 years at UCLA, and the great John Wooden, who won 10 national championships in 12 years, he had a great line. It said, it's amazing what can be accomplished when no one cares who gets the credit. And I see it all the time in every walk of life. I see it with every team I deal with is, the question sometimes is, are you truly, genuinely happy for somebody else when they have success? And I think that's getting harder and harder, by the way, because I think we're raising a generation of youth that are very kind of self-consumed. But that unselfish nature within an organization, to me, is the ultimate, where we are all buying in. We all agree that the bigger picture is really what we're striving for. And, if we all do our job and we're all unselfish and we all play our role and we do it with an open heart, that, man, amazing things do end up happening. So to me, it's sometimes there's so many parts of that, but in general, that unselfish nature to me is paramount.
You see that in sport a lot, though, don't you? You see these players who are drafted that are individually incredible, and then they get on a team, and the team doesn't seem to. They don't seem to be in service to the team. It's almost like the team's not serving me. The team's not giving me the ball. The team's not giving me a position. The line of scrimmage is broken down. I mean, how? I guess this is the $1 million question, and if you could answer this, or anyone could, it would be easy. But what are some of the ways in which you achieve a breakthrough with someone? I come from an environment where we deliberately don't recruit talent, right? So we're looking for a very high above average team in the world of fighter pilots, because over the years, what we've seen is very talented pilots end up killing themselves. You only need to push the boundary that one time and you're going to fly into the ground. So it's not a case of, hey, we don't want you because you're talented, because you're getting disrupted. We're going to not recruit you because we have your best interest at heart. We don't want to see you die, right? When that's not the consequence, okay? So, an athlete's not going to die if they're selfish or if they try and do something uber talented. But how do you achieve a breakthrough, particularly in college, I guess, where you've got a set group of players, they're going through a system, so you don't have them forever. Like, as a leader, how do you, I guess, inspire or motivate a person, let's not even call it a player, an individual to be selfless? How do they see what's in it for them?
That's another great question. I think that's like you said, it's the $1 million question. I think in any organization, when your best player, your best person in the organization, when one of the people that are at the top, and we all know who they are, we know on every team who the best salesman is, who's the best player, who's the best at this. When you can get that person to completely buy in, and when that person becomes the most unselfish, the hardest worker, the one that shows the most grit, the one that has resiliency, the one that is consistent. And when that person, and as a coach, you're trying to motivate everybody, but if I can find that leader in the group who's usually not always your best player or your best asset, if that person buys in, it just seems to filter through the whole organization. Because people that are striving to be phenomenal, they want to follow somebody who's phenomenal. They want to, I want to latch on to that person. I want that person to be the model. And so for me as a coach, I was always trying with the best player to have the best player buy in to everything that we were doing. And then I think from there, you have a chance. You got a chance within the organization. But then I think it's also, it's like every time I took a new head coaching position, and as a head coach at Alabama or NC State or Murray State, wherever it's been, I think it's important to paint a picture, a true picture of what the organization is going to look like at the very beginning. Here's what this is going to look like if, in fact, we all do these things. And I'm going to paint the picture of success of what this is going to look like. And now I want all of you to buy in. I want you to trust me. Trust the fact that the steps that we're going to take, the process that we're going to be in, if we buy in, it's going to take us to where we all want to go, which then creates value for all the individuals. So as the organization wins and does well, everyone's value increases. I think sometimes, especially, I think human nature is a lot of times is I'm taking care of myself first. I'm going to make sure that I do these things so that therefore I can get the reward later, whether it's a big contract or a promotion. And the hardest thing to do is to get somebody to lay that down and trust the fact that if I buy into the vision and to the goal, if I do that, I will create more value for myself because the organization will win. We all win. And I think that is the tricky thing in leadership, to get your team or your organization to really be at the highest level.
And I guess that's where you have these challenges in terms of personally motivating someone. So, like a salesperson who gets motivated on their individual performance into a reward for the entire team, right? And if my job is if my mortgage and my lifestyle is funded by my personal success, I think you just can't help but human nature just stealing a deal from someone else, hiding things, and just feathering your own nest. Have you ever been in that situation? Have you coached a player that has been supremely talented but just couldn't get with the program? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Very difficult. And the answer is yes. I have had those guys that are extremely talented. They're not bad people. They're actually wonderful people. They have just, it's kind of been a way of life for them to always somewhat think of themselves first. And to kind of break that, you got to break that chain a little bit. And what I always try to do is to convince some of those guys that your value is also going to be based on how well our team does. And in other words, if you're a great player, but your team is not very good, I don't know that you're creating the maximum amount of value for yourself. But if you're a great player and your organization, your team wins, now the places that you want to go as a player, you want to play in the NBA. Guys in the NBA that are scouting, the general managers and the scouts, and I scouted for Dallas, the Mavericks for a year and a half. Talent is one thing, but then you see guys that are talented that are elevating the whole organization. And those guys, in my view, are the ones that create the most value for themselves because they have the ability to lift the organization alongside of themselves. And so I think that's the part where value is created when the organization wins. And I think value then is created for everybody in the organization as it wins as well.
You use that word a lot, value, right? Which obviously, like, to me, value is always the intangibles. Yeah, like there's a cost and there's a price, and then there's value there's an investment. Then there's the return on investment. While you're talking, just to think of something topical. I mean, I'm Australian. I live in the US, and NFL was always something on the fringes. I'd watch a Super Bowl, but never really involved in the day to day. And my son is an NBA fanatic. Orlando Magic is one of our clients. My son's done a whole bunch of work with them, but maybe something, let's take someone like Shedeur Sanders, for example. Yeah. What do you think happened there? Do you think that this conversation is something that affected that individual where they elevated their value to the point where they also reduced their value at the same, like they traded personal value for collective value?
I think with Shedeur, and again, I'm on the outside looking in, and I'm not, there obviously at Colorado and now in the Cleveland Browns. But, I think again, if I'm in the NBA or in the NFL or Major League Baseball, and I'm trying to evaluate a person, and talent will always jump off the page. Talent stands out. I mean, we all can look out there and say, who's the most talented guy? Well, it's that guy or it's that girl right there. They're very talented. But then on top of that, I think when you're starting to compare, I got a talented person A, I got a talented person B, I got a talented C, I got a talented D. Now, what separates that? What separates that group? And in athletics and in business as well, we don't always get it right. Sometimes we get it wrong, and we get fooled sometimes with talent. But then it takes a deeper dive to say, okay, what am I really getting? What am I buying? If I'm the Dallas Mavericks and I'm buying and I'm taking Luka Doncic, which I was with Dallas when we drafted Luka and Jalen Brunson. And not only are you evaluating the talent level, but you're also evaluating all the intangibles. Can that person lead others? Can that person withstand adversity? Can that person, what is their work ethic like? What is their relationship with the other people in the organization? Do the other players respect and like and follow that person? There's so many elements then and so much homework done that you're trying, just like in business, if I'm going to go hire an account manager or a CEO, whatever that may be, I've got to be able to dig down deeper to find out, what are you really made of? Do you have the grit, the consistent effort, the resiliency, the desire, the integrity to do things right in the most difficult times? And if you can find that person that starts to answer all those questions, yes, 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 now you've hit the jackpot. But again, people miss all the time. You know, Tom Brady was, I think he was the 147th or 74th, whatever that number was, pick in the draft. I mean, every team in the NFL passed on him. Every team had a chance to take him and didn't. And even when he was in with the Patriots, they played Drew Bledsoe, and only until Drew Bledsoe got hurt did Bill Belichick put him in the game. And all of a sudden, so even in the midst of trying sometimes to find all those answers, and especially in sports, when you're evaluating talent, it's actually very humbling if you're very honest, because talent will blind us. It always does. But finding the elements of character that you want in your organization, that to me is the key.
Just talking of Brady and, the greats, look in the Max Verstappens, in Formula One, there just seems to be innate ability with those kind of dynasty athletes. And I think this is a really important part of leadership, is they seem to be quite thoughtful. They seem to be technically competent, but at the same time have the ability to see the big picture. They have an awareness that seems to escape other players. Is that something you've observed as well in your years as a coach, that it's almost like the skill set of the player is the basics? You just got to have the skills, but the application of the skills, and obviously as a coach, that's your job, right? You build a game plan, you coach into it to try and build anticipation, to have players in the right place at the right time, so you don't have to think too much when you're busy. But how do you find that balance between thoughtfulness and execution?
It's another wonderful question. The great ones obviously have talent. There's no question about that. And I've had, coaches on my podcast. Bruce Arians won the Super Bowl at Tampa Bay with Tom Brady. He coached Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger. I can go through about 6 quarterbacks that he's had throughout his career that were off the charts amazing. And in basketball, we look at, in my view, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Larry Bird. They see the big picture, but they also have a competitive spirit that is unrivaled. I mean, the great ones, when we talk about being competitive, everybody's competitive to a certain point, but there are those that have a competitive nature that is almost unhealthy. Their desire to be great, it never allows them to rest, period. Because the desire to be great is so strong in those moments, I think, when, the going gets tough, your back's against the wall. We talk about the get it done mindset, a GID approach. There are, in my view, only a handful that separate themselves from the pack because their competitive spirit, it will not allow them to fail. Like, my mindset says, I am not going to fail. I will get this done, or we will get this done together. But whether it's that ability under pressure to make the greatest play, we watched Tom Brady do it 100 times, down 7, down 14, fourth quarter, the drives, the passes, the catches. It was unreal. Michael Jordan, to me, separated himself from the pack, and there's nobody in that ballpark. I don't care. We have all these fun debates nowadays. Kobe Bryant would have been second, but those guys had a competitive spirit that I'm not sure we can teach it. We can help kind of harness it as leaders, but there's a competitive spirit in there that there were things that happened in their lives. Think about going back. Think about the stories of Michael Jordan being cut as a 10th grade basketball player from his high school basketball team. Tom Brady not being drafted until I think the 7th round, sitting there after a nice career at Michigan. Kobe Bryant struggled in his first 2 or 3 years in the NBA, struggled. And he became a guy that, gets 81 points in a game, scores 60 points in his last basketball game. So events happen, and that begins to mold them. And it begins to mold who they become as they become adults. But to me, I'm always marveled a little bit at the competitive spirit of the great ones. They won't let themselves fail. And they can't rest until they stand on the top box. And for them, that's what it's all about.
If you're enjoying the show, I'd just like to ask of you a little favor. We're on a mission here to ignite the world's leadership potential. We need to reach out to as many leaders as we possibly can. So if you're enjoying the show, I just ask you to leave a review, to subscribe, to help introduce this podcast to other leaders to join you on your journey to flawless leadership. We're going to head back to the episode now. I hope you've enjoyed what you've learned today. Please remember, let's ignite a movement of flawless leaders. Subscribe, leave a review. Let's get back to the show. And there always seems to be in a lot of these stories, particularly the dynasties, where there's this very tight relationship. And I'm not saying it's a friendly relationship, but it's very respectful between that champion and the coach in their coachability and their ability to remain curious. How important is that for you? Have you had players that you've been particularly close to, and how's that affected performance in their openness to look at things from a different perspective?
Well, I think you nailed it with one word, just one word. You nailed it, and it's curiosity. I think the great ones first of all, they have a secure nature to ask questions, that they're secure enough in themselves to say, you know what? I don't really know it all. I don't have all the answers, and I'm going to trust you. But I'm going to trust you because I'm not insecure. I'm extremely secure. And, you look back, and you made such a great point. You look at Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, Kobe Bryant and Phil Jackson. And you look at the guys with the Spurs with Greg Popovich in the NBA. But there becomes a tremendous amount of respect, but there's humility even when you become great. The humility that says, I want to learn more. I want you to help me. And I think if I look back, the great players that I coached, and I've coached, guys that have been lottery picks in the NBA, and probably over 30 something or 40 guys that have played in the NBA. The great ones are always curious. They always want to learn more. They always are asking questions, even whether it's in practice, in a film session, in a game. It's, what about this? What about that? And that curiosity, to me, it stems from security. But I think that is it's paramount, I think, to becoming spectacular.
I've got two questions to spin off that. The first is the film review. Obviously in sport and as a fighter pilot, there was never a phase or a period of execution that didn't involve reflection. And talk me through that a little bit as well, like as a coach, and the way in which to coach film reviews effectively and the way in which to not do that effectively. The company that I bought, we've worked with 17 NFL teams. The first team we worked with were the 2012 New York Giants that obviously had a scoring imbalance. They were the worst performing team to ever win a Super Bowl, and their film reviews were not good at the start. So maybe take us on a bit of a journey about the importance of reflection and doing that in a really open and honest way, and how to coach someone through reflection.
I think the first thing, it's another great question, but I think in my view, there has to be trust between the leader, the coach. If you're a leader of an organization and you're going through a review process, whatever, there has to be trust that as we close the door and we sit down to talk, whether it's one-on-one or in a team setting, there has to be enough trust developed over time, in my opinion, where we can speak truthfully. And I think, again, we talked about the great ones that have curiosity. The great ones, to me, also have the ability to have self-honesty. I'm not sure you can become the best that you can be without self-honesty. You have got to be able to have thick enough skin, but also desire. I just desire the truth. I want you to tell me the truth. And I can imagine as a fighter pilot, I need the truth because I don't want to fly an airplane in the side of a mountain. I want the truth. Tell me the truth. And I think for me, it's delicate sometimes in a team setting because, some players are not as secure as others. Some players are, easily embarrassed, or some players, and some players want it. They want more. Just give me more, coach. Tell me exactly, what we're looking at and how we can get better. And one thing I always try to do as a basketball coach, and hopefully this can apply to all different kind of walks of life. We would play a game, and, I would go home. I had all my assistant coaches watch the tape that night, and they probably didn't want to, but, they had to watch it. I watched it, and I wanted all my assistant coaches to fill out forms that I handed them of everything they saw, each individual, and both in our team, offensively, defensively, intangible things. You write it all up. And I've got 4 assistant coaches writing everything up, and I'm writing them up. The next morning, I take all those and put them together. So I've got my notes, I've got their notes. Then what I wanted to do is when we went to practice the next time we got together, I took guys one-on-one. And I may take me 30 or 40 minutes to get through this. But as we're getting loose and we're warming up, I'm taking you, and then I'm taking the next guy, and I'm taking the next guy, and we're going to sit and talk. And I'm going to ask questions of them. Tell me what you were thinking last night. You drove to the middle of the paint, and then you made this play. What was going through your mind? And then we would talk about, what are the options? What options did you have there? Where could you have been better? And I think the players that I coached appreciated the fact that, and I could tell it too, the day after games, they were anxious. They were waiting for me to come talk to them individually. Now, we may watch film together as a group collectively. I may take a player and watch some film with him, but I wanted to go and have honest conversations. You did a great job in this area. Phenomenal. The plays you made, the thoughts you made, the decisions you made, these were excellent. Let's talk about these where you may have made poor decisions, where you didn't do a great job at A, B, C, and D. And let's talk about why. And let's fix that for the next game. And I think over time, there's an old saying that I loved that says, yard by yard, life is hard, but inch by inch, life's a cinch. So for me, it was little by little, little by little, little by little. Let's keep getting better. Let's keep trying to shave off the parts where we don't need. Let's add more parts that we do need. But we just do it. And over time, then over a 4 or 5 or 6 month period, all those inch by inches added up to become something in the end where even the individual feels, I have gotten better. I've improved. And I appreciate the honesty. Self-honesty to me it's so important, and the great ones have it without a doubt.
Yeah, there's a lot you just said there. I want to explore in a little bit more detail. One of the points you just made is after a game, I know the coaches didn't want to, but they had to go and review the tape. And we have this kind of philosophy. This is not Air Force, it's a military. We call it the burden of command, right? And how when you're in charge, you just have to do so much more. When you're a leader, you have to invest so much time compared to everyone else, right? What have you seen in great coaches? Because I personally think, particularly in corporate, when you're not running a season, when you don't have to have the accelerated learning curve, you don't have to peak just at the right time, when you're grinding it out each and every day, I feel like there's a lost opportunity for leaders in the corporate and business world to be more coachy in their approach as leaders. What was your expectation with your coaching leadership, and how did you get their buy-in as well? And how do you personally deal with that burden? Because it is a burden, right? Like, you have to perform. The athletics department expects you to win ribbons and banners and pennants. Like, how do you deal with the burden of command? And how do you help others with that?
I'm going to start with a story. When I was a graduate assistant coach, I was 23 years old. I'm in graduate school at UCLA, and I'm coaching and I'm learning. It's my first year. I'm basically an intern, in the business world. That's the equivalent of being an intern. And we were playing a game. UCLA was playing at Cal up in the Bay Area. And I'm about 23 or 24 years old. And we're going that morning to a shoot around. We're going over to the gym. We're going to do a little walkthrough for the game that evening. And so we're on the bus, and the head coach, Jim Herrick, is sitting in the front seat. And I came up and sat down beside him. And, I'm young and I'm excited. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to learn everything. And I can just remember I leaned to my right and I said, Coach, what is the biggest difference in being a head coach and an assistant coach? And I was expecting this magnificent answer. I was wanting this big, dissertation of all these things that make it, different. And he just turned to his left and looked at me. And the question was, what is the biggest difference between being a head coach and assistant? He looked right at me, he said, lonely. And it kind of, I remember I was like, whoa. And then as time went on, I became a head coach. And it was so true. Leadership at many times is lonely. When I was an assistant coach, I had the ability to go to the other assistant coaches and shut the door and we could talk and vent. And well, we did this, we did that. And, that was part of our growth. You're learning from your peers. But when you're a head coach or you're the leader, you're the CEO, there are many times where you're by yourself and you understand that the decision rests on your shoulders. Ultimately, you're making the call. And so when I became a head coach, what I really wanted more than anything is to have the best possible staff of people around me. I wanted to surround myself with guys that were incredibly hard workers. Just the same thing as we wanted in players, incredibly curious. I wanted to have people that understood loyalty. And, I never wanted people to do anything unethical, but they do have to be loyal to the decisions I make as a head coach. There are times when, whether it's a basketball team or in the corporate world, there are people that might go to the person above them and they're frustrated. And I don't understand. Why are we doing this? We should be doing this instead. And what I wanted is my team of coaches to be loyal to the process that we were in. And sometimes that was difficult because I was an assistant coach at one time. I had guys that would come to me and say, why are we doing this? Why are we playing that guy? Why is that guy? And, sometimes I might agree, but my loyalty was to the head coach. So I always wanted to have people around me that were loyal, that were hardworking, that obviously were talented and understood the game and were great teachers. But then also that group of people, they have to buy into the big picture as well. Everybody has to buy in. So it starts, with me as the head coach, the assistant coaches underneath me, the players that we have underneath them. It all kind of funnels down to everybody being on the same page. But leadership, in my view, it can be lonely. And when I was a head coach, there were times we had tough losses, tough, hard losses. And I'd go home and I'd lay on my bed and I'm staring at the ceiling and I know it's only me. There's only one head coach. And the assistant coaches aren't getting criticized publicly. The players sometimes aren't getting criticized, especially in college. And developing thick skin was something that I think as a leader, you have to have that. And you got to kind of just charge right through that and just kind of use that as fuel.
And I think one of the blind spots people have in sports, and I think it's the same for all leaders, whether you're head coach or CEO, is there's no such thing as just being an infallible leader without any accountability, right? And I imagine for you as well, you're dealing with athletic departments, you're dealing with the college, and you've got kids that also have to go to college and not just play the game. How did you manage the balance between the expectation of the college, protecting the team from that, and just some of your personal leadership practices to deal with some of those incredibly high pressure moments? Like, was it just purely like put the body armor on and away we go? Or were there things that you did ritual wise to help you deal with that kind of intense pressure?
I don't know that there was one thing or two things, but I do know this is then as a coach or a leader of the organization, I needed the full support of people that were above me. And when I felt I had that, it was almost like it was freeing for me because I knew even when there was criticism, and there's always going to be criticism, and no one is immune from that. When you sit in the seat as a head coach or the leader of an organization, you will get criticized. That's part of the turf. But for me, I think within my staff, within my players, to understand and almost build a wall around us, that we are almost insulated, that we're together. We got it. We have each other's backs. We're going to support one another. We're going to be loyal to one another. But also, when I felt that loyalty from above, it was, it's, as a coach or a leader, it becomes one of the great things that you do have. But on the other hand, I've had times where I have felt, my athletic director or the president of a university, maybe didn't fully support me. And that becomes crippling. It's crippling, as a coach, because now you're walking on eggshells every day and it's hard to perform. So just for me, I've always wanted to insulate my teams in the era of, digital social media in sports. And I would imagine this would apply to almost every field. You got to be so careful. I got to where later in my career, maybe early 2000s, like 2015 and on, maybe, players, young people, they were so concerned with what was being said about them on the internet. And, trying to also teach them, there's a guy sitting in his bedroom, probably in his underwear on his computer, and he's forming an opinion about you. He doesn't know anything about you, but I think for young people, it was so impressionable. As soon as the game ended, they wanted to grab their phone, look at their phone, and start scrolling all through all the message boards of who said what, who is praising me, who is not praising me. And that can be intoxicating, number one, if you're getting a lot of praise. And you can almost be so intoxicated with that, you lose sight of reality. Or on the other hand, it could be difficult for a young person to navigate and to listen to people that are criticizing them and saying that they weren't worth a crap. They're terrible. How can a guy be so bad? He sucks. He's awful, blah, 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 blah. And so I think, constantly trying to teach especially young people, I think, to put that away. That's not reality. Let's deal in reality and truth between us in our own bubble.
Let's talk about, one of the tough decisions that leaders make, right? Cutting players, but also your own experience. Even the greatest coaches on earth eventually get cut, right? Like there is no such thing in particularly in sport and in leadership as well. I was just watching a documentary on Southwest Airlines, and the same leaders that ran the company for 30 years and made an amazing company got cut. They all got cut because the board just decided, hey, we're going to do things differently. In your experience of failure, how does experiencing your own failure help you shape the way you deal with others? And how can we make, I guess, failure a great learning experience, but also give that experience back to others?
I think it's a difficult thing, but I think if any of us can truly see the value, and it's hard because, I've been fired. I was fired from my alma mater at University of Alabama. And, I crawled into my bed in a fetal position for about a day. I was convinced the sun wasn't coming up the next day. I knew it wasn't. This is the end of the world for me in my mind. And the reality was, sometimes, I've heard the phrase rock bottom becomes your foundation for your next growth. When you're in it, it's hard. You're embarrassed. You're hurt. There's no easy way to paint that picture, when you've been fired. And I've experienced it. I think when we look back, though, sometimes on those experiences, that's when we really became better. We got better. We had to show resiliency. You have to. We all have. And if you can show yourself and others that resilient behavior, that I'm going to take this and I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to have self-honesty. Sometimes there was a lot of things that contributed to the decision for me to be fired. Sometimes it was my own. But again, self-honesty everything starts there. But
Yeah,
to me, The biggest steps I've ever taken in my own personal life have been on the heels of when I have felt that I have been at rock bottom. And that's where growth sometimes actually is the best.
Yeah, I guess they say, growing is a painful experience. And your career is testament to this, in that I guess there's two ways you go. Some people just never get over it, right? Whether it's a breakdown in a relationship, whether it's being fired, there's no growth that happens. You just wallow in the muck. But equally, through that failure, as you said, is the growth to be a better coach, to be a better player. And I'm sure with Michael Jordan getting cut in 10th grade, it's probably a pivotal moment in his career as well, to say, just also, you don't want to ever feel that again, right? Like you want to avoid that pain. I think, we certainly see it a lot in business when leaders say to me, the problem with this company is I can't fire anyone. The problem in this company is there's no consequence. People can just come and show up to work and they get the bean bags and the free Coke in the fridge and the nice yogurt, but I can't cut anyone. Do you have advice on how to cut someone in a nice way and to help them see it as an opportunity for growth? Or is it just a painful experience and it's kind of on them?
It's painful. And I will say this too, me personally, I think we're all different. And I've had to fire coaches before. And I would go back and say it's probably the most difficult things I had to do is to fire a coach. And they could be fired for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's just we've kind of hit a point where I feel like we can be better and you've kind of reached that potential. Sometimes maybe they've done something wrong. But, I think for me personally, I struggled with that. It was hard for me. But at the same time, I think what you always have to do is to say to yourself, what is truly best for the organization? What is truly best? And if in your mind as a leader, you believe in your heart it's best that I replace this person, then you have to do it. You have to. As a matter of fact, I've told some other coaches who I've spoken with that are in that position where they feel like they have to make a change, but it's almost like they don't have the gumption to do it. It's just hard to do it. You're talking about, uprooting a family, firing a coach. Children are going to have to move to another city, change schools. There's a lot that go into that when you're actually making a change. But I think when you're completely honest, you do need compassion. But again, honesty to me is the key. If I feel like I can sit down and have an honest conversation and say, this is what needs to happen, it still makes it hard. For me, it was. Other people, maybe they can put somebody on a chopping block and chop them real quick. But for me, I knew I was dealing with a person, a human being. Sometimes I actually I like them. They're great people. Is that, but they're not the best for what the organization needs right now. And so very difficult. And then I've been on the other side, again, like we said, where I've been fired, where those who are above me felt, hey, maybe it's time for a change for these reasons. So it's all part of the turf. Having some thick skin is part of the deal, I think, for you to get better. But without self-honesty and honesty overall, I think you're going to struggle.
So just to come into the tail end of the podcast, what would you say throughout your career and through your life would maybe be the three biggest lessons you've learned as a leader that you could gift to another 23 or another 24-year-old or an emerging leader? Like what counsel would you give them to help them accelerate their growth and show up as the best leader they can be?
Well, number one, understand that as we talked about, leadership is lonely, but embrace it. Embrace that. But still have people in your own world that we all need accountability and we all need a team of people. And sometimes as a leader, it's another leader in another organization that you're close with, we all have to find that group of individuals that we can open everything up to and kind of bare our soul to say, man, I'm struggling with this. How do I get there? But form that team around you, I think, is number one, because leadership is lonely, period. End of story. The second thing I would probably say is, there's nothing more important to me than your integrity. And when I speak, and I speak all over the country. I'm pretty vulnerable and pretty authentic. And there have been times where where I have found my moral compass, where I've looked down and I didn't even realize it. My moral compass was shattered. It was broken. And we don't want that. We want our compass to be pure and intact. I think when I go back, and I always say this to people, when your values are clear, your decisions seem easy. And I think when I go back and look back throughout my career, when I've been in those places, when my values are clear, it's a different world. When I have sacrificed my values, I've cut a corner. I've convinced myself that this action is good because, well, everybody else is doing it, or nobody will really know, or, it's only a small thing, and, all the things that our mind says to us, and we sacrifice our values. I think that's when we begin to walk on quicksand. And so for me, as I talk to other coaches, young coaches, I speak to corporate groups, part of what I want to emphasize is understanding how important it is to do everything right, do it the right way. I coached for John. I didn't coach for John Wooden. I was at UCLA. Coach Wooden had retired. I can remember one day I'm sitting in his apartment in Encino, California, and we're just talking about all kind of things. And I remember he looked right at me, and it's almost like his eyes just penetrated into my soul. And he said, "Mark, don't ever forget that the softest pillow in the world is a clear conscience." And there are times in my career where my pillow wasn't soft because I'd made mistakes. So for me, I think those are some things that I think I would hang on to as I begin to try to help others become the best that they can be.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's almost like there's a caveat to the GID mindset, which is get it done, but not at any cost.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Very, very grateful for your time. I know you're busy, and I know the insights you've shared today are phenomenal. For me, they are as well. And I think it just reinforces there's just some constant thematics in leadership and curiosity, selflessness, loneliness. It is lonely at the top. There's a reason that phrase exists. So, hey man, look, thanks, mate, so much for coming on to The Few today. I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure. Been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Hey, Mark, where can everyone find you?
www.coachmarkgottfried.com. Everything's there. The podcast, the speaking I do. So it all kind of rests at coachmarkgottfried.com.
Awesome. And if you missed that, if you're driving, it's going to be in the show notes here. Make sure you reach out to Mark. I think like anything, if you can spend an hour with someone like Mark, you're going to learn lessons for a lifetime. So once again, Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.